Over the last 25 years, I've had the privilege of interviewing and highlighting some truly interesting people. Everyone who is anyone, both the famous and the infamous. From presidents and their first ladies to kings and queens, movie stars and pop stars, captains of industry, heads of state, sports personalities, innovative entrepreneurs, and some pretty fascinating everyday people. Today, I'm proud to introduce you to Dr. Joan Muir, a clinical psychologist whose work in family therapy, developed at the University of Miami, has become a model that is used in community agencies in the United States and around the world. Dr. Muir, it's a pleasure to talk to you today.
Oh, the pleasure is mine, Miss Jones.
Excellent, excellent. So let's get started. How actually did you start as a clinical psychologist?
It's a weird story, and I appreciate it. I was 11 years old in high school in Jamaica, and we had a Christmas Pixie exchange for $2. And a classmate gave me a book called Dibs in Search of Self. And it was an old book from the 1960s about a young boy who was getting child therapy from a very famous play therapist in the United Kingdom. And I thought, what a wonderful thing to do. You could talk and play and help people. And I'm like, I'm going to be a psychologist. That's it.
You know, that is so interesting because we have a very similar story. I decided I was going to be a lawyer based on a TV character. And it's interesting because I can imagine that if you grew up any way the way I did, I didn't hear about a lot of lawyers, black women lawyers, and I'm certain you didn't hear about a lot of black women clinical psychologists.
I didn't hear about psychologists, period, much more black women psychologists. That's why I say it's a stretch. It was something in my soul that was reaching out because it was a stretch. I had never met a psychologist, didn't know a thing. And yet I built a really successful career. So I know that that was an act of faith. I know it.
That's called being put in your direction by God and other forces, no question whatsoever. So, talk to me a little bit about what a clinical psychologist actually does.
So, a clinical psychologist is probably the best known of all the group of psychologists. And there are many kinds of psychologists. And I just want to put a plug here. Not all psychologists do therapy, but clinical psychologists do. They're trained to assess and diagnose and treat serious disorders or everyday issues. They also do research, which is the other half of psychology that people don't know. That's why we have a PhD. That psychology is really a science. It's a science of human behavior, and we have to learn how to test it and how to develop interventions to help people. So that's a lot of what people think a psychologist does. It is really a clinical psychologist they're focused on.
I see. So, Dr. Muir, as a clinical psychologist that's in private practice, tell me what your specialties are.
So my specialty is built on the work I started at the University of Miami. I came in as a young researcher, and there was a group of Cuban psychologists doing a lot of research on family therapy. And I was very fortunate to join that group. It has informed my practice, which is primarily family therapy and couples therapy. There's a lot of people doing individual therapy. I believe the last time I looked, it's only about 20% of therapists do family therapy. So there is a need out there, and I'm proud to be part of providing help for that need.
And I guess that leads me to my next question. What do you consider to be the most rewarding aspect of your work? And especially since you are in that elite 20% that work with the family.
It's the reward is the same on both sides of my work. The translation of this family therapy model into practice in community agencies across the world, and my private practice is the same, which is learning to engage fathers in therapy. Therapy is not something that works naturally for a lot of men. Talking about your stuff is sort of maybe easier for women. But also we found in the research that it's often therapists who block fathers from being in therapy. They come in with the belief that mothers are important, and it's mothers and children who should have a conversation. So my biggest success is on both sides of my work, with the community agencies emphasizing that whole families means fathers. It doesn't matter whether they're married or living in the home. And in my private practice, my most rewarding sessions have been when fathers have come in and really brought in their expertise.
And not just bring in their expertise, but bring their whole self to therapy. Am I right?
Yes, yes. And by expertise, we mean in family therapies to approach them as the expert on their children.
Mm-hmm.
That's an empowering message that when you give that to a dad, because often they feel like you're calling because you think I'm the problem, and probably the wife or the former wife or the never wife thinks that that is the problem. And so it's important. I learned to give an empowering message like, I need you. I can't help your son or your daughter without you. So then they become the expert working with me. And it is a completely different message. That is the most rewarding part of my career.
It just sounds fascinating because I've always been of the opinion that a child does in fact need to have that paternal influence in their life.
Mhm.
I am a new mother for all practical purposes
Oh,
because I've
wow.
been married now 3 years, and my husband brought to the marriage the most amazing young man who I met when he was 10, and our son is now 15. So I am helping to raise a young man. And I have to tell you, um, the relationship between he and his father is so important in him becoming the young man that we all hope he will be.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. It's very obvious that boys need their dads as role models and girls too. Because when I think about my own career, it was my dad who sort of gave me that spine to keep going when I sort of would get discouraged and say, oh, I'm going to leave academia. I don't know if this works for me. And he was, I remember he said to me, how many 35-year-old Black women do you know are faculty members at a major university now hanging there? So girls and boys need their dads. And like we've learned, it isn't about the marital status. We're not talking about that you have to be married and living in the home. It's making sure that children get that contribution from both mother and father. But as a therapist, recognizing that I could be the barrier, because if I give the idea that mom's expertise is the most important, or mom's view of the problem is the most important, then our research showed you actually are blocking dad.
That makes some complete sense. And I'm just going to piggyback on what you just shared about your own father. My father, without a doubt, was influential in our home. He actually showed me what I should expect as a woman from a man in a relationship: the
Mm.
strength, the dignity, the respect. And so I know a part of your work is not just family therapy, but couples therapy.
That's right. Couples therapy is a lot of fun, and it can be a lot of hard work as well. So I have a full range of couples. I have these beautiful young millennials. I'm so impressed by them because they're in couples relationships and they're trying to figure it out early. I think earlier than my generation, and I think they're going to be so successful. And they come in also pre-marriage, and their intuitiveness is just amazing. They're not waiting to crash and burn down. You know what I mean? And then we have older couples who've been married 25 years who are empty nesters and they're struggling to reconnect. They're thinking about divorce. And then we have the in between, raising children who have troubles. That can strain a relationship
Yes.
when your child is troubled. And that's really been the core of my work at the University of Miami, family therapy for troubled youth. So I'm right in that space, really being able to support and giving out the message that it isn't what's wrong with someone in the family, it's that the whole family needs to come together to be part of the solution. So it's very rewarding.
And their dads that are willing to do it. We expect that moms are going to do it, but when you hear your concepts and theory borne out by your research, when you see it actually happen in front of you, it must be tremendously rewarding. You've outlined
Absolutely.
some things that you love about your career, but what would you consider to be the proudest moment of your career?
It has been, as Bette Midler would sing, the wind beneath my wings. When I was interviewed by Who's Who, they asked me, who were my mentors, and I listed three people, and they go, oh, all of them are already listed in Who's Who. And one of them I have to talk about is Dr. Walter Phillips at Yale University. I was doing my 1-year required internship in order to graduate with this PhD in clinical psychology. So already intimidated being at Yale, right? And he was just such a good mentor, but everyone talked about him as super bright. We would say, oh, his IQ is like 150, and he's you have to the intern the year before warned me to really express myself and not be intimidated, because he's so supportive, and if I didn't use the time well, I wouldn't learn, and I did. So we came up for this evaluation 6 months into this 1-year program, and I expected, like everyone else, to get feedback on the good stuff and the bad stuff. And we had a great relationship, so I expected him to be honest. And he looked at me and he said, I have been doing this for 19 years. And I want you to know that you are the best intern I've had the privilege of supervising. I thought I was going to faint.
Bravo. Oh, Dr. Muir, you're just inspiring me this day. I love it. Absolutely. And I know that being a part of the community is important to you. And I've just looked at some of the things in your background and in your experience. Will you share how you give back to the community?
The one vehicle that I have has helped me as a professional, but allowed me to contribute to the community. Being a member of the Association of Black Psychologists. Mm-hmm. This is a premier organization that was formed at a difficult time in the United States in 1968. Really as part of the civil rights movement, as a counter to the American Psychological Association, which at the time was actually espousing racist ideas, white supremacy, supporting the idea that Blacks have lower IQs and that this is a scientific fact. I mean, it took courage to start that work. Yes. And to create an organization for Black psychologists that became an advocacy arm that then changed APA, which is now so inclusive and so respectful of diversity. So I had the privilege of being the president of the South Florida chapter of the American Association of Black Psychologists. I also had the privilege of being a national secretary. Oh. And that was scary stuff because it was such hard work. And I am proud of that organization. And right now we have a little project that has turned out to be so successful. Our founding member of the two founding members, Dr. Evelina Bessman and Dr. Herman Dorsett, founded the chapter in South Florida in 1975.
Fantastic.
And I know that those two people opened doors in Miami that allowed me to walk in 20 years later. Yes. And Dr. Dorsett made his transition 2 years ago. We started a scholarship in his name. And in the middle of COVID, we've raised close to $3,000 to give to a promising Black student who will help them through their career. We had no fundraiser, no event, just ask people to donate. And I am so proud to be part of that work. So I am the coordinator for the scholarship committee in the name of Dr. Herman Dorsett.
Fantastic. And actually, I'm going to be working with the Association of Black Psychologists as a part of some COVID awareness town halls that we're doing. You know that the major organizations of Black doctors across our nation have really gotten together to talk to the Black community in particular about the COVID vaccination. Yes. And a lot of people don't realize that your emotional connection to medicine is as big a deal as your physical connection to medicine. And I am very, very encouraged by just some of the work that is coming out of the professional organizations that African Americans have really focused in on. So congratulations on the work that you're doing with the Black psychologists. Let's talk a little bit about family, because you've indicated that you got a lot of support from your family. So what actual role did they play in your success, Dr. Muir?
So this is where I have to be completely honest. I believe that I had a subconscious motivation to be in not just in clinical psychology, but to focus on family, to try to understand my own. There were pluses and there were minuses. You know, I grew up in this very strict religious home, and people say, oh yeah, Jamaican families are strict. I'm like, no. If I could just help you understand it, I was raised like a Jamaican Amish, right? This was unacceptable. This was unacceptable. Makeup was unacceptable. And I didn't realize until I was an adult and struggling, that had an impact on me, how restricted I was and how rigid I was. And I have been working that through. And so I feel like my family is my greatest support and my greatest lesson.
I feel like I have just had my own therapy session with you today. Thank you so much, Dr. Muir. What is the one thing you'd like the viewer of this feature to walk away with?
To be aware that all of us have our strengths and all of us have our vulnerabilities. And when you're feeling really, really vulnerable and there's no one in your social sphere that you may have to support you, the thing may be that they love you, but the thing may be too big, go see a mental health professional.
Thank you so very much. February is Heart Health Awareness Month. And as the National Volunteer for the American Heart Association, I am always emphasizing make sure you work with your doctor to maintain your heart health. But I need to also remember to emphasize that your mental health is just as important. Relieving the stress in your life can add years to your life.
Yes.
And I know that to be an absolute fact. And Dr. Muir, the work that you're doing with families and couples and individuals is, as my grandmother would say, God's work. So thank you so very much to what you are contributing to our society. And I look forward to hearing more and more about your wonderful work. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been my honor.